Welcome to Real Talk with Sarah. I'm your host, Sarah Roberts, and in this episode, we are going to attempt to explore a topic that affects as many as 1 in every 6 couples. We're talking about the issue of infertility. With so many people struggling to conceive, I wanted to have a real conversation about this topic with people who have both experienced infertility as well as experts who can help us navigate this sensitive subject with care. We've got naturopathic doctor and fertility expert Priya Prakash, who will help us understand this complex issue better. And later we'll talk with Olga Salgado-Lacroix as she shares her own personal experience with IVF, as well as the myriad emotions that those who have experienced infertility go through. So here we go. Episode 17 of Real Talk with Sarah starts right now. Well, I've wanted to explore this topic for a while, but without having any real experience in this area, I knew I needed to get the right people on the show to help us do the job. Well, we're in luck because I've got naturopathic doctor Priya Prakash with me to help us understand why so many couples are struggling to conceive. Welcome, Priya.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
I'm so happy that you're here. You have an amazing story. Before we kind of get into your story, I want to know, why does it seem like infertility is almost becoming an epidemic? It seems like everyone's really struggling these days.
It really is. Independent of the fact that, yes, we're waiting longer and longer to start a family.
Okay.
Independent of that, there are so many environmental and lifestyle factors that are contributing to our dysfunction in our health and our hormones. And we take for granted that by the time we want to have kids that it should just happen.
Right.
Combine that with the fact that we are waiting later, and it becomes a lot more difficult than we anticipate for many of us.
So for many of us, including even in your own experience.
Exactly.
Is that what happened to you? Is that you just kind of decided, I'm not ready yet, I want to have babies at this time, when this is that what happened?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. I was one of those women who I wanted to have babies since I was a baby, and I had planned this for years and years, but at the same time, I had a strong desire to build a career that was fulfilling, and I became a naturopathic doctor, and so I had grand plans of, okay, I'm gonna wait until my final year, and we're gonna start trying. I'm gonna get pregnant. By the time I'm done, I'm gonna have the baby, and then wait before I build my practice. And it so didn't happen that way. What ended up happening is I got pregnant, but I miscarried shortly after. So that was my first experience with miscarriage, and I thought, okay. It's just not the right time. So let me build my practice, let me do what I came here to do.
Like you almost took that miscarriage as a sign that
Absolutely.
It just wasn't the right timing. Okay.
Yeah, and then miscarriage number 2 came, and then miscarriage number 3. So in total 3 miscarriages and a lot of heartbreak. It was a struggle for, I think it took a total of 5 years to conceive my son, who is now 5 years old. So I have 2 children who were completely naturally conceived, but there was a lot of struggle in that journey to form our family. And I never in a million years imagined that it would have been such work to start a family.
I think that's the thing. I don't think enough people, I think, like you say, they just sort of put a mark on the calendar that once I check this box and check this box and check this box, when that's all taken care of, then that on the calendar I've decided at this age is that when that's when I'll start trying.
That's the right time. And you know, sometimes life has different plans for us, and our bodies don't necessarily accept what we want to, because sometimes there's underlying things happening that steer you in a different direction, and that's really what happened to me. And in that journey, in that 5-year journey, I can honestly say that about half of it was a major struggle, and the rest of it, there was a sense of ease and a letting go of control, and finally getting my health in control and in balance. I discovered so many aspects about my health that I thought were okay, but through more diagnostic testing and understanding how the body works and what are the factors that influence our fertility, I discovered that I'm under the influence of all of those factors, and I need to do something about it. So that transformation is what really led me to uncover these, what I call the 4 hidden factors of infertility.
All right, well, let's get digging in. What are the 4 hidden factors? Well, before we do that, you mentioned miscarriage. When you and I were chatting on the phone before doing this show together, tell the audience the number of people, of women who experience miscarriage?
Oh, I couldn't give you an exact stat, but it is very high, very, very high. And maybe not as much these days because we're not having as many kids, but especially in the old days, for women who had multiple children, at least like 2 or 3 miscarriages was very common, right? And these days we don't talk about it. That's the thing, we don't share. And so, I mean, just in sharing and in talking to so many women, I hear about so many miscarriages happening, and it's like, oh yeah, I had a miscarriage or 2 before I started my family, and sometimes that is normal. Yes, sometimes that is normal. 1 or 2 can be normal, but 2 or 3, that's starting on, okay, something might be out of balance here, and what can we do to actually prevent that from happening again, of it becoming a recurrent problem.
Right, and I think that's why it's so amazing what you do as a naturopathic doctor, and why I'm such a fan of naturopathic doctors. You go below the surface, you get to the root cause. You don't just sort of slap a Band-Aid solution on something or prescribe a medication. It's like, no, let's figure out what's going on and why your body is conceiving, but then not holding on to the pregnancy. Like, what's happening there?
It really is a matter of digging deeper and really coming to a place of balance. And one of the big problems is that we mask our hormones. So a lot of women, understandably, go on birth control pill at a very young age, either legitimately for birth control, but sometimes to regulate hormones or to get rid of acne, right? And it's a complete masking of the underlying problems, because your cycles are going to be regular because they're totally controlled. So the birth control pill does not balance hormones. It's simply taking control of your hormones so that you don't have to deal with it. But then, when they want to get pregnant and they come off of it, everything starts coming back. So the cycles start becoming irregular again. Acne starts coming up, and it's like, oh, what happened here? I didn't have this for several years. Well, there was something assisting you not to have that.
Fascinating. So a lot of people are using the pill as this tool, but it's masking a lot of these issues, so that when they end up going off of it, all those issues are all right back.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, wow. That's super frustrating and really empowering to know.
Yes, and I encourage women to get off of the pill a good year or 2, or more ideally, but at least 1 year prior to wanting to even start to try.
Interesting.
That gives a good amount of time to rebalance your hormones, to understand how your body actually functions on its own, not under the influence of hormones.
Wow. And so good to know. I don't think we think when we take the birth control pill, I just don't think enough of us, we pop the pill and we don't think about the effects of that. We think about not getting pregnant.
Yes, and as teenagers, we don't think about the bigger picture, understandably so. We don't want to get pregnant when we're a teen or even in our 20s these days.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I feel like that's a whole other show regarding conversations that you have with your teenagers, to not be on the pill, but to guard against, unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah, so yes, I understand why women choose to go on the birth control pill, so there's no judgment there. It's just that I wish it would also come with the responsibility of taking control of one's health at the same time.
And if it's being used for dealing with acne or hormonal issues, let's get underneath the reasons first. If it's not for birth control.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. Okay, the 4 hidden causes.
Okay.
What are they?
The first one is food. The food that we eat these days, because of farming practices and environmental issues and overeating certain foods over and over again, the foods have become such a trigger for inflammation in our body. And that inflammation can damage the environment in our gastrointestinal tract, so our gut health essentially. And our gut is termed the second brain. So it contains 100 million or more nerve endings that come straight from the brain, so it is essentially part of our nervous system and has a major control on every other system in our body. And it also contains over 100 trillion bacteria that regulate our immune system. And so when there is inflammation happening in the gut, it affects much more than just our digestive system. So the foods that we eat will trigger inflammation and an imbalance in that second brain, which then causes hormonal issues and a cascade of other immunological issues, which can decrease fertility and cause a lot of hormonal issues.
So junk food, really refined foods,
processed foods, inflammatory foods, things that even seemingly are healthy foods like eggs or dairy or even whole grain wheat that we don't look at as junk food. For some individuals, that can actually be a trigger for inflammation.
Interesting. So it's maybe using like a food mood journal to see how you're feeling.
To see how you're feeling, and there are some testing that can uncover what is happening, what is the response that your body is having towards those foods, and it's individual.
All right, so the next one, toxins.
Toxins. So if you're a human being living on planet Earth, you're toxic, I am toxic, and the babies growing inside of us are toxic. It's a major problem. We live in this soup of chemicals, partly from the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat, and much closer to us is just the products that we use on a day-to-day basis. As women especially, we wear a ton of products, so there's makeup and hair care and shampoo, conditioner, soap, and then we douse ourselves with fragrances, and then there's the cleaning products, there's air fresheners, laundry detergent, it comes everywhere, and many of these products contain hormone disruptors, chemicals that are synthetic, but that can actually alter our hormone regulation, that are called endocrine disruptors, and they start to interfere with how our body produces estrogen, for example.
Okay,
right?
We have 90 seconds to do the last two tips.
Okay.
Suboptimal hormone and nutrient levels.
Okay, so we all get blood tests, and sometimes we know something is wrong, but the blood tests come back perfectly normal. There is a difference between normal and optimal. Right? Normal is just good enough for survival, and optimal is what we want to thrive. So we want to make sure that your levels are in the optimal range for fertility and hormone balance.
Understandable. And what about stress, the impact of that?
Stress is a big one. Cortisol is our stress hormone that impacts our fertility, our reproductive hormones directly. The adrenal glands, which produce cortisol, has a direct connection to the ovaries in women and to the testes in men. So when we're overproducing cortisol from day-to-day stressors, it sends a signal to our reproductive system to shut down hormone production, or to slow it down, or to interfere with it. So that's a major one, especially when we're going through stressors over a chronic basis.
I don't think enough people realize the damage that stress does in all sorts of ways. Okay, after the break, Priya will share her top tips on preventing infertility. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I've got naturopathic Dr. Priya Prakash with me exploring the issue of infertility, and she's come armed with 5 tips to help prevent it. All right, let's dig in. Tip number 1, how can we prevent it?
So tip number 1 would be to eliminate toxins from our day-to-day products.
Okay.
So as I was alluding to earlier, we, especially as women, use a lot of products that are loaded with endocrine disruptors, so chemicals that interrupt our hormone balance. So this is everything from our makeup, our shampoo, perfumes, cleaning products, the overuse of plastic. It's everywhere. Dryer sheets, laundry detergent. These are all products that have alternatives that are much safer, less toxic, and you know, we've come a long way in the beauty industry. There are so many more lines of really quality products. It used to be maybe 15 years ago that it was really hard to find these products, and if you did, they weren't really great. And now that has changed. There are amazing lines that are really great quality. And
like we're not compromising quality just for them being natural, because I'm like that, you know, I want it to work.
Exactly. You want those vibrant colors, and there are so many amazing lines that are safe for our hormones. So I really think from a young age, we should be encouraging our teenagers as they start to use these products to switch to natural, and as families grow together, we should be switching all of our household care products to safe, hormone disrupting free, toxin free alternatives.
And is an easy way to figure out which ones to not use just any of the ones that are marketed on TV, you know, those, do you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if that's an easy way, as opposed to giving us a list of 100 different chemicals that we should avoid.
Right. So one of the resources that I like to send people to is the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org. I have no affiliation to them, but they are an amazing resource, and they have this database called Skin Deep where they talk about all the rating about the products, which ones are more toxic than others, from sunscreens to bug sprays and things like that. And it also, they have databases for our food too, the ones that are higher in pesticides and lowest in pesticides. So it's a great resource to understand what to buy and the brands.
Excellent, good tip.
Yeah.
All right, number two, prioritize stress reduction.
Yes, so we live really busy lives, and every day we don't think about the impact that our stress is having on our hormones. We just blindly go about our day. And I think that the issue is we need to put some awareness into it.
Yeah.
Yes, life can be stressful, but it's really about our perspective and what we do to mitigate those risks. And one simple tip to reduce cortisol levels and balance, just kind of keep us grounded, is if everyone could spend 5 minutes a day just sitting quietly and doing some deep breathing. It's incredibly powerful how in such a short period of time that drastically reduces cortisol, and it shifts our body from being in what we call the fight or flight response mode, which is our sympathetic nervous system, transitions us into this kind of calming state, which is our what we call the feed and breathe system, or otherwise known as the parasympathetic nervous system. Calm so that we can digest our food, that we can work on reproductive functions and restorative functions in the body, and just 5 minutes a day of deep breathing or meditation. And you don't have to take a fancy course, right? It's really simple, and there's so many apps these days that can help us with guided meditations to help us do this on a regular basis.
And breathing is free.
Yes, exactly.
It's the easiest, most accessible. I often suggest to my students to, while they're at red lights, do their deep breathing. Just have these kind of visual cues throughout the day to take a moment. Because from what I understand, you and I chatted before, when people are in that stress response, I mean, there's no libido. So I'm not saying that every parent who's trying to conceive is even enjoying it necessarily. I'm sure it's quite a stressful experience. So even all of that, adding that extra stress.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a stressful experience if we make these decisions every day to prioritize managing stress and having a different perspective.
Well said. All right, your third tip is around food, cutting out refined processed foods and sugar.
Yes, sugar. Sugar is such a disruptor to our hormones because it creates inflammation, and it causes such a big release of insulin, which is a hormone that will affect every other hormone. And we are used to eating certain comfort foods. We are a society that blends food and emotions and socializing together, and so there's so much emotional attachment to sugar. But when we start really understanding how that's affecting our hormones, we can start shifting our choices. So early on in your journey, in your teens and 20s, start cutting out the sugar and focusing more on whole foods. And what I like to tell my patients to is kind of like a 90-10 rule. If 90% of the time you are, and even 80, that you're eating whole, real foods that are unprocessed, not refined junk food, and lots of vegetables, and quality proteins, quality fats, then it leaves you that time every once in a while on the weekends or in social gatherings to enjoy the ice cream or the chocolate or some chips, and your body will forgive you because the foundation is well taken care of.
I could not agree with you more. I feel so strongly, even when you were talking, in teens and 20s, try to start reducing the sugar. I kind of love reverse engineering the whole thing, and from childhood all the way up, so it doesn't have to be this whole reversal in teens and 20s, where all of our lives we're eating the food that God, planet Earth, Mother Earth, source, whatever you want to call this, we were provided with the kinds of foods that really do know how to work in our bodies properly.
I wish I can go back to my childhood and tell myself to not eat Fruit Loops for breakfast.
Why did we all want the Fruit Loops? Like, that was what I would beg my mother for. Beg her.
I did. I begged and I got it, and she didn't know any better.
Once a year, my mom would let me.
I actually got it more frequently.
Really?
And I attribute a lot of that to the dysfunction of digestive health that I had in my teens and my 20s, and that I discovered was a big part of my infertility journey.
Wow. So a big part for you was that diet piece.
Gut health. Yeah,
gut
absolutely.
health.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. What about the supplements that we should be taking?
Okay, so there are so many supplements out of the market. It's so difficult to discern the difference between something that's high quality that does something or money that is spent just making expensive urine.
Yes.
Okay, and so choosing high quality brands of supplements. So for example, if we're choosing a prenatal, we want to make sure that it contains the activated forms of the vitamins. And so we're all told that we need to take folic acid. Folic acid is actually synthetic. That's not what our body needs. Our body needs folate. And so there are brands of prenatal vitamins that contain what we call methylfolate or active folate. And if you look for that, that is likely a good quality and will likely contain all of the other vitamins that are in their active absorbable forms, so that you're not just taking a prenatal for nothing.
Should we not be trying to get it from food first?
Absolutely, and that is the foundation.
Okay.
Food first is always my philosophy, so everything that I mentioned earlier. But the issue is that our food nutrient density has drastically dropped because of farming practices, and even if you're eating perfectly healthy and organic, we're still not getting the density of nutrients that we need in order to counteract the toxins in the environment and the stress that we're dealing with. So it is a good idea to supplement to counteract that.
Other than folate?
Coenzyme Q10, or the activated form of it, which is called Ubiquinol, is a powerful antioxidant that affects every one of our cells. And particularly, there's been a lot of research that shows that ubiquinol and CoQ10 has an effect on improving the quality of our eggs and our sperm, and preventing age-related decline. Because as we age, as we approach our late 30s and early 40s, we do have a decline in our fertility, partly because of just the quality of our reproductive cells, our eggs and our sperm. And by taking coenzyme Q10 or ubiquinol from early on, especially if you're deciding to, put your career over having babies, which is okay. If you're taking something like that, it can at least slow down that process and preserve egg health and sperm health, so that by the time you're ready, you're just a step ahead.
Nice. So you should be taking that maybe in your late 20s if you're thinking of getting pregnant in your 30s or later.
Yeah.
All right. And then what about the last one? Work on hormone rebalancing.
So I always tell people that when you want to start to have a family, you should be thinking about working on balancing your hormones well ahead of the time that you want to start trying, right? So I say at least a year, if not 2 or more, right? And ultimately, it goes down to our teens and 20s, if we're kind of reversing this process, is when something is going wrong with your body, make sure it's addressed. Get the right testing done. Intuitively, we know when something is off. If you're tired all the time, or gaining weight in places that you shouldn't be for unexplained reasons, or your periods are off, or you might have hormonal acne, things like these are signifiers, or your hair is falling out or something like that. These are signifiers that something is out of balance. And one of the hidden factors that I mentioned earlier was that, having suboptimal hormone levels. We should be dealing with this and seeking the appropriate help of someone who is going to get you into the optimal zone instead of just in the normal survival zone.
Yeah, I think that's what's so cool about naturopathic doctors. You're always trying to get us to optimal.
Yes.
Like, it's not good just being baseline.
Yes, and I don't want to be just okay. I want to thrive. I want to have great energy to do all the things that we're meant to do in our time on this planet.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, Priya. Obviously, you had a happy ending with your 2 children that you were able to conceive
and I am
naturally.
blessed. I'm so blessed, and I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. So that's kind of part of my mission, is to prevent this from happening in the first place.
Well, amazing. Thank you for your work.
Thank you very much.
After the break, I'll have Olga Salgado-Lacroix with me to share her personal experience with infertility and to dig into the emotional side of things. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk with Sarah. If you're just joining us, we're talking about infertility on this show, and I've got Olga Salgado-Lacroix, who experienced what's called unexplained infertility for years until she was able to conceive using in vitro fertilization. She's here to share her very emotional story and to reassure those struggling that there is hope. Welcome, Olga.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy you're here with this bundle in your belly. Obviously, this is another happy ending story, but let's go back a little bit and share with us the journey.
Sure. So my husband and I were both diagnosed with unexplained infertility. Personally, I think that from all the diagnoses you can have, this has to be one of the most frustrating diagnoses, because if they can't find the cause, they can't really give you a problem, a solution to it.
Yeah.
So we initially didn't know we had unexplained infertility. We simply were trying, like every other couple, to conceive shortly after we got married, and really even before once we were engaged, we were so keen to having children. And 1 year down the road of no pregnancy, I started getting worried and thinking, like, what's happening?
And can I just stop you? Can I ask, when you're when you're wanting to get pregnant, is it like a business transaction a lot of the time, where you're almost...
It becomes a business transaction, 100%. A chore almost. My husband would have described it as a chore. So that's taxing on your relationship for sure.
And I imagine that increases stress hormone.
It does.
Yeah.
And if you don't know much about, like most of us, about fertility and how it all works and how unique it is to actually conceive a child, how many things have to line up at the right time, we all take it for granted as just, as they sold it to us in high school. You have sex and you get pregnant right away. So I think that we kind of, or at least my husband and I grew up with that expectation that the moment you've really tried to have a baby, you have one.
Yeah.
So there was the first kind of disappointment in our journey to know that wasn't happening.
And can I ask, were you on the birth control pill? And then
I have never been on birth control. I have always been a huge advocate of healthy living. I almost died at the age of 10 for a completely unrelated issue.
Wow.
So I became aware of just being healthy and healthy lifestyle.
Did you just say you almost died at the age of 10?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have time on this show to talk about that.
So hormones is something that I always was very aware of, just trying to not put into my body. And so I, never went on the birth control pill until I needed assisted fertility, that I needed to go on.
Okay, so later on
hormones.
You're going to get into that. Okay, so keep going with your story then. Keep walking us through.
So throughout that first year that didn't happen, I started searching for help. Like I said before, I'm really in tune with natural options and holistic options. I actually found Dr. Prakash, and I was a patient of hers, and I went through the entire change of my diet. Foods that I was convinced were healthy because they're labeled as healthy were not healthy for my body, like such as eggs and quinoa, for example. So I started reducing the inflammation on my body. But at the same time, I wanted to see a regular doctor and just do any kind of physical testing that they could do to figure out what was wrong. I am a doer, I have a goal in mind. I want to get to my goal, so I'm proactive. So we were doing both things simultaneously.
Like medical doctor,
naturopathic doctor. And at that point, I wasn't doing too much research. I was just really following both of these modalities. The regular doctor did all kinds of physical testing, and they couldn't find anything physically wrong with either one of us, which was great. And Dr. Priya was just suggesting the changes of lifestyle, which we to this date haven't stopped. So 2 years down the road, we still don't have a baby or an explanation as to why we didn't have a baby. And I started trying to conceive at the age of 31. It is totally true that you have a biological clock inside of you. There is an intuitive part of your body that knows you're aging, your eggs are aging, and you don't have a lot of time, which increases your stress levels. And so that made us look into assisted fertility, which I promised you, I got into the Ottawa Fertility Clinic thinking, if there's nothing wrong with us, this is a really simple solution.
Right.
They're just going to tell us, I don't know, take this pill and you'll be pregnant.
Yeah.
And we started with a less intrusive intervention, and it didn't work. So we didn't have a successful pregnancy from that.
So you did do a first?
Yeah, an IUI, so intrauterine insemination, which is just they wash out sperm from your partner and they just put it inside of you as you're ovulating. And some women experience success with that. They started us on that protocol, which wasn't successful. You could continue to go down that path. I, as I said, wanted my goal. So it's been like, at that point, 2.5 years of trying, getting appointments takes time. Like you just don't book an appointment and you get in.
Right.
And then you have to follow your cycle and things take time. So we did one of those. We did one IVF here in Ottawa and that was also unsuccessful. And at that point, the doctor in Ottawa said to me the magic words, this will not work for you. You are going to have to adopt because you're not a good candidate. You don't respond well to hormones, which I'm not surprised. My body has never really responded well to anything that is foreign to it. And we don't think you're a good candidate. And so look into adoption. Now, my husband got out of that meeting before the doctor finished saying that sentence and left. I had a few tears, cleaned them up, and told myself at that moment, nobody's going to tell me when and how I conceive. So I decided to research. I started like crazy research mode. I found a great clinic in Toronto who offered me to do IVF with very little hormone stimulation since I obviously was not responding well to them. We did 3 rounds in a row to get the most amount of embryos. And we ended up with 3 embryos and only one was healthy, and that's my baby, Mateo, growing in my belly right now.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, 4.5 years later, we're here, halfway through.
So there are different types of in vitro fertilization. I don't think I realized that.
So no, there is one type of in vitro,
Okay.
but there is an intervention that is less intrusive where they don't have to extract your eggs, because that's so intrusive in a woman's body. So they can just monitor your ovulation and then just bring the sperm in at the same time.
Okay, so
that you can plan it.
inseminating you.
Yeah.
And as opposed to taking out your eggs with his sperm in a petri dish.
That's right.
And then implanting in the woman.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
So we went through all the steps, and our successful in vitro was they grabbed the best egg, the best sperm, put it inside the egg, so they conceived our baby in the lab. They did a biopsy of these embryos so they could count their chromosomes, so that by the time that we transfer one into my uterus was a healthy one, so you had higher chances of attaching to the uterus or to the placenta at that point and grow. So
I think so many people, like we were kind of talking about, they just take for granted that it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think, what you're saying so much, and what Dr. Priya was saying, is really getting our bodies into that optimal, healthy state so that they are ready to experience pregnancy and carry the baby to term.
Yep. And that takes time and effort. And lots, for us, we were really healthy and physically and mentally, and I would have thought we had greater chances. We still had to switch all of our products in our homes. There is nothing or not as toxic in our home, from the foods we eat to the shampoo we use to the deodorant to the makeup. Just becoming really aware of all the little things that could be having an impact on our health and on our fertility, to, like you guys were talking about previously, to bring ourselves up to optimal.
Honestly, I just think that so many of us just put on the makeup, put on the products. We don't even think, or I think maybe a lot of us think that we don't use that many toxic chemicals, but then when you start lining them up.
Or you think, the conversations that I have with women, you're like, yeah, I know doing this is not super healthy, but I just do it once in a while. Like we minimize it. Mm-hmm. And so that's our responsibility as consumers, I think, to do our research and to take care of our health to that degree where we wouldn't want to use it once in a while. Like that's my approach now. But I mean, it's hard to keep life that way too. There's toxins that you cannot avoid. And I think that the most responsible companies out there even honestly will tell you that there might be traces of these toxics in their products, right? Like to be completely toxic free it's an illusion. But to attempt to nourish your body and your home and your environment as much as you can, it's not only in your best interest, but in the planet's best interest.
In the planet's best interest, and then of course in this experience of fertility, we don't think about the stuff that we're breathing in the air. I mean, the toxic load that we're experiencing just by living life.
Yeah.
Then all of the different products that we're buying, we're applying topically, then all of the frankenfood, the foods that are not food.
Yeah. And there's a lot more talk about food. Like there's a lot more awareness of eating, you know, the superfoods and the healthier foods. But what people don't realize is that your largest organ is your skin, and it absorbs everything. It goes through, you know, like whatever you place. So like I'm a big fan of putting oils that I would eat from my kitchen straight into my bathroom to just like, you know, make sure that if my body's absorbing this, I know is as healthy as if I was eating it.
Like applying avocado oil.
Avocado oil, I'm a big fan. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, after the break, Olga will share her mindset tips so that people trying to conceive don't lose sight of what's most important. Back in a moment. If you're just joining us, I have Olga Salgado-Lacroix with me to share her top tips for managing the emotional roller coaster of infertility and developing positive mindset shifts that can make a huge difference. So you were sharing before that you experienced miscarriage throughout your experience with your husband of fertility, and I'm just wondering about those feelings of grief and loss that come with a miscarriage, and then with when your period comes and you don't want to see your period come. How do you manage all of that in your own life? And then I know that you help others as a coach.
Yeah. So first, I think it's important to become aware that the most recurrent emotion while you're trying to conceive and you're not successful is grief and loss. And women experience loss and grief each month where they recognize they're not pregnant. So when that period comes, that when you were in your 20s, you were so excited about. When you're trying to conceive, it's just a reminder of that illusion you had that didn't come about. And that's when your mindset begins to shift into a more hopeless and negative mindset. And I think it's very important for women to know that what they are experiencing, that disappointment is called grief of a loss. Each month you're not having your dream of becoming pregnant, it's as if you were losing somebody you loved, you know, because it's that illusion of this might be the month. And women, we jump into conclusions and future telling. So the moment you start planning, you think, okay, this baby is gonna be born on this month, and like it's gonna be summer. Like, you know, your mind immediately jumps into that
the
phase.
Dreaming, like, yeah, the planning.
So there is that loss when you experience. When you experience even just your period. So I encourage women to not minimize that, because it's a very important emotion, and is one that it requires time to process. And when you lose a pregnancy, I often hear my clients say, it was only 5 weeks. Like, we as women undervalued our pain. Like, I shouldn't be in so much pain as much as somebody who may have lost their pregnancy later on in that pregnancy. And I again encourage women to just show up for those emotions and understand that grief is grief and loss is loss, and you don't have to justify the amount of grief or loss that you have pending on your journey.
I think that's a really important piece of advice, because I think you and I were chatting beforehand, and you were sharing with me 75% of women have a miscarriage. And if no one's talking about it, then everyone's going through grief and loss privately.
On their own. And there is a lot of women, we carry shame. We feel faulty when we can't conceive. It's in our DNA, for those who want to have a baby, that we should be able to do this. I used to apologize to my husband, and he used to remind me, like, this is happening to both of us. You're not doing this to me. And with the women I work, I recognize there is this sense of guilt and shame. And I like to bring back history, because back in the days when divorce was something we didn't talk about, one of the reasons to annul a marriage was if the woman could not carry a child. And it was always viewed on the women. There was no view on male fertility, which we now know it's the same percentage as women's infertility issues. So, and there was shame on that woman.
Yeah.
Put on her as if she had caused this. Hence the 3 months, waiting the 3 months before you can tell people if you're pregnant in case you lose the baby. That's the explanation.
Yeah.
So if you lose the baby, you're on your own, it's okay, you didn't tell anybody. You also have zero support system to cope with your loss. So I encourage women to share and celebrate their pregnancy, and to, people are not, like, the community is no longer putting shame on us. We do this to ourselves. It's women who continue to prolong this emotion, this thinking that it's our fault, and that is something to be ashamed of.
Wow, well, talk about mindset shift. That's a huge one right there. What's your first tip as far as your mindset shift tips? Mindset shift tips.
So first and foremost, we have a lot of inaccurate thinking. A lot of our thoughts are inaccurate. And what I mean by that is that we don't have evidence, concrete evidence to prove our thinking. So many of us have anxiety caused by our thinking, where we just believe something. And so my first tip is, do not believe everything you think about, especially if you're down the path of already having anxiety. Very common when your hormones are not in order to have anxiety. Very common to have anxiety when you're experiencing loss and grief, or when your desires for something don't come through, not just infertility, right? When you're trying for something. So my first suggestion is, understand that some of your thoughts are not going to be accurate, which means you don't have evidence to prove them. And if you don't have concrete evidence to prove them, then question them. Can I believe this? And choose to believe the ones that help you feel better.
Yeah, that's so powerful in all of our lives. We don't have to believe our thoughts.
No.
We can be the observer and question them. That's brilliant. What's your next tip?
So I have to tell you a little story. Throughout my journey, I met this woman who told me I was never going to be able to conceive, that my husband was going to leave me, because how good of a wife could I be if I'm not able to have a child? She even told me that I was paying a karma from a past life, and that's why I couldn't conceive, and that if I ever was going to become a mom, I was not going to be a good mom. And I don't usually share the names of the people I talk to and meet, but this lady was myself.
Right.
And that was the bully in my mind. That was a voice in my mind that was so strong. And I was believing every word she was saying. So my second tip is, be aware that there is a bully in your mind, lives there. And I'm not really sure what the purpose of that bully is, to just create more shame and make you feel more guilty and bad about something that you didn't cause. But just be aware of it and don't let it bully you.
Honestly, again, we can stop believing everything that we think. Well said. What's your third tip? Let me help you. Be present to your emotions.
Yeah, be present to your emotions. So we become allergic to what we think are bad emotions, right? Like grief and loss and anger and resentment. We don't want to feel them, so we try to avoid them, and that's how those emotions grow and persist. So I'm a mindfulness coach. All the coaching I do is based on mindfulness. I encourage every woman and man out there going through hard emotions to just unattach from what that emotion means. They're just emotions. They're like your breath. They come in and they go out.
Yes.
They're not permanent. No emotion is permanent. And if you really want them to go away, let them go through you. You know, the emotion is just gonna come. You're gonna become aware. You're gonna add thinking to that emotion. Try to stay away from that story and just let the emotion go through you, so that you can be present to your body experience of that emotion.
So feeling the emotion, the grief, feeling
feel
that
it.
loss,
Go to town with that emotion, and just don't be afraid of it.
I think
It's just an emotion.
It is just an emotion, but I think that so many of us, we push them away. We don't want to feel them, because either we feel guilty about feeling them, we feel shameful, we don't want to give ourselves that time to go through it. But if we would just allow, we'd feel so much better on the other side of it.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, and get it moving, like you say. All right, your fourth tip.
Do not compare yourself to others.
Okay.
Okay, this is just in general a tip to be happy.
Life.
Okay, just, if you want to be happy, stop comparing. You are unique. Our stories are so unique. You heard Dr. Priya's, you heard my story. You are going to hear so many people's different stories. And if you compare yourself, your brain, first of all, always chooses somebody, pre-select somebody who you think is better off than you. So you're creating suffering just the moment you compare. Nothing good comes from comparison. And all comparison begins, in, especially fertility, from the question why? Why me? And if you go down that, trying to answer that, that's when the bully of the mind shows up. Well, you must not be fit. You must be unhealthy. There must be something wrong with you. So do not compare yourself to others. Show up to your life experience, whatever that is. And if you don't like it, say, now what? Instead of why. And then your brain would jump to possibilities and search for that one more thing that you can do.
And that's exactly what you did,
That's
isn't it?
exactly what I did.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, we've got time for your last tip, which is find the gift.
Find the gift. So after 4.5 years of infertility, throughout my infertility, I was fully aware that there had to be something in it for me, that there had to be a gift in all of it. Like, I haven't had the smoothest of life, and I know that each time I went through a struggle, something beautiful was waiting for me. And I had my eyes open and my ears open, and I just really wanted to understand what that was. And I am convinced this is true for everybody else. If you're going through something hard, open your eyes to see what that gift is. And for me, the greatest gift infertility ever gave me was unconditional love for myself. Because I can't imagine the Olga I knew before having been so able to love the body, functioning the way it was, not giving me the baby I wanted, not doing the things at the time I wanted, but really showing up to my experience with complete love for myself and my life story. So I encourage every woman to just show up to their story, whatever that story is, whether it fits the story they wanted to have or not, and just look for that gift. For me, it was unconditional love, and I'm sure each of us can just go into it and find it in a different way, but find that gift, because it's there waiting for you, and your experience changes, your view on it changes, and you become, I today feel lucky that I went through this 4.5 years of trying to conceive.
I think that's such an optimistic way to end, that you feel hopeful and happy that you went through that experience. It's again, just with everything that I think this whole entire show ever talks about, that we don't go through things, just for us, we go through them for others, and things don't happen to us, they happen for us. Really, there is a gift inside all of it, and what a beautiful story, and what a wonderful happy ending. Congratulations on the upcoming birth, and thank you for being here so much. All right, when we come back, I'll share my final thoughts. Back in a moment. As human beings, we have a biological desire to continue the species, and for some, the pull to procreate is felt deep in their bones. The thought of remaining childless is something that feels unfulfilling or empty, so their vision of happiness and success in life is predicated on becoming a parent in the most traditional sense. Many women reaching their 30s refer to a ticking biological clock. But as we've learned tonight, they often put off planning a family to instead focus on careers or travel or continuing their education, or to simply feel more ready, waiting until the precise moment we want to start a family to begin the process, maybe leaving too much to chance. And if we've learned anything tonight, we've come to realize that our health is what's most important to be prioritized at every stage of our lives, and certainly when we are trying to conceive and carry a baby to term. Getting to the root cause is something I think is important in every area of our lives, and fertility is no exception. Going deeper to understand and support the needs of our precious bodies and brains is key to optimizing our health, mental, emotional, and physical, and can provide clues and solutions to this growing epidemic. Thank you to naturopathic Dr. Priya Prakash and fertility coach Olga Salgado-Lacroix for helping us understand and explore this topic with compassion and grace. It is our sincere hope that if you or someone you love is trying to conceive, that you've learned something here tonight that may be able to help you on your journey. Until next time, I want you to remember one thing: that no matter where you are and no matter how it feels, you are never, ever alone. See you next time.